Good evening, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilal TV, DSTV channel 347. A growing number of Afrikaners have spoken out against what they describe as the misuse of their story in foreign politics, particularly that of the USA. Their history, they say, is being distorted and used in the United States to push divisive and misleading narratives about race and identity in post-apartheid South Africa. In an open letter, they declared, "Not in our name," rejecting claims that Afrikaners are facing racial persecution at home and reaffirming their commitment to a democratic, inclusive South Africa. Now, the reason why the statement came was U.S. Ambassador-designate to South Africa, Brent Bozell III, pledged to advance President Donald Trump's call for Afrikaners who, quote-unquote, wish to flee unjust racial discrimination to relocate to the United States. We've seen that happen, of course, at the start of this year. This now, of course, comes at a point where diplomatic ties between Pretoria and Washington are not really on good terms. And quotes like this from Brent Bozell doesn't really help the situation at all. Joining me now to take this discussion further, I'd like to welcome political analyst from the Northwest University, Professor Andre Duvenhage. Prof, good to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilal TV.
Well, it's nice talking to you and the viewers.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Prof, this letter that was written, and it's a raft of Afrikaner intellects from the church community, from civil society, from various aspects. One of them, of course, Prof. Preet Koukamp, who is your fellow colleague at the Northwest University. How important was this letter in stating that the views of Brent Bozell III does not reflect every single Afrikaner citizen within our country?
We agree to disagree on many things, and I believe this letter will probably be one of them. But if you take a look at the current situation in South Africa, there is no doubt that we have a failing state, a state that is failing on literally all levels, politically, economically, and socially. And what is happening is that the Afrikaner community is responding to this crisis in a way that they are becoming proactive. They are creating their own security structures. They are creating their own universities and so on. And when the option was there, they also asked for support from the Trump administration as they are in connection with many other institutions throughout the world. And it's definitely not the USA alone. But the fact of the matter is that the Afrikaner community in general is a very diverse community. Basically, I will identify three main categories within the Afrikaner. The one is what we like to call the Afrikaans speaking group. That's a very open group, very inclusive. Then you have the Afrikaners who are perceiving themselves as the majority is white, not exclusively white, but predominantly white. And then you have another group that is very exclusive, seeing themselves as the Boers. Now, if you look at this group of 40 plus, you will find them in the open category. And their reaction basically was that Solidarity and AfriForum cannot speak on their behalf. They disagree with the criticism that is coming from AfriForum and Solidarity. And one of the main points of critique from the side of AfriForum, Solidarity, and there's also other parties in South Africa, is that we have more than 120 race-based legislations, basically arguing, and the best example is black economic empowerment. So if you are a white person, you apply for a job, then you're being disqualified because you aren't black. And we believe that this is a form of racial discrimination, and that point was highlighted by AfriForum and Solidarity. Secondly, they have a serious problem with the marginalization of Afrikaans as a language in both schools and on university level. And Solidarity and AfriForum did a lot to promote Afrikaans in the sector of education. Now you have the one group, the 44 group, that is saying no, they don't have a strong argument they can put forward. They can only say they identify with certain principles within the bigger political dispensation that is currently under criticism. And on the other side, you have Solidarity that is arguing they are working on behalf of the Afrikaans people, and not only the Afrikaans-speaking people, also other majorities that felt they were discriminated against. And what is interesting, the Americans, the Trump administration has picked up these issues of marginalization, of lack of order and stability, or the security situation, discrimination against Afrikaans, and put this before the ANC government. And this is now taking the relationship between South Africa and America on a very, very low level. And currently, they are discussing the AGOA agreement, which is making provision for special arrangements accommodating South Africa on American markets.
Prof, what I find slightly disturbing by the comments of Brent Bosel III is that obviously President Cyril Ramaphosa went to the White House in May, and the footages that were shown with regards to the so-called white genocide proved to be false. And it's not just one news agency, it's various other news agencies and certain organizations that said that the footages were shown were quite false. But listening to Brent Bosel III, it kind of seems as if he's bringing up what was mentioned back in the end of January and February, that many Afrikaners are facing persecution within South Africa. And remember, this is the same guy that is probably going to be coming through to South Africa to represent the USA in an ambassadorial level here in this country. I want to get your thoughts on the comments that were made by Brent Bosel III, given that his appointment as the ambassador to South Africa is practically done and dusted.
With the new ambassador, we know that he is very conservative in his orientation. He was already against the ANC since the late 80s, even before the new dispensation in South Africa. But maybe I must also argue this from another point of view, and that is the current security situation in South Africa. At the moment, about 80 people are murdered on a daily basis in South Africa. That is more than many countries where there's an active civil war going on. We have on average about 120 plus rape cases on a daily basis. The genocide topic is coming from the fact that we have proportionally high farm murders in the country. And the farm murders is sometimes extremely brutal. It happened in terms of, for example, 60 or 70 knife wounds and that type of thing, people that were burned in some way. So the brutality is extremely high. And some people are arguing if you are not going to stop this, this may end up in a form of genocide. And already we have seen a number, I haven't got the specific total, but the last time I heard it was 3,000-4,000 farm murders that happened on a regular basis in South Africa. To put you in my town, the majority of people who can afford it are living in compound areas. That is a security environment where no people can just enter your specific place of where we are situated because of safety and security concerns. So in that sense, we have serious security problems. I'm not going to argue that we have a full genocide. I don't think the number of totals are justifying that, but that there is a direct onslaught from a legislative side, politically speaking, and also from other sides on the Afrikaner identity, their language, their culture, their symbols. There's no question about it. And maybe I can also say this, in terms of what I am picking up, by far the majority of the Afrikaans-speaking people are supporting solidarity and not the 40-plus people. But in a democratic state, we accept the reality that we must debate these type of situations.
We're going to continue this debate, Professor Duvenhage, because after the break, I want to touch on, of course, the farm murders that are currently happening. And, of course, you brought that up because Brent Boshoff III continues to say this. And, again, it really puts the relationship between Pretoria and Washington on a knife edge. My conversation with Professor Andre Duvenhage continues after this break. Welcome back to News in Focus. Prof. Duvenhage, again, thank you so much for staying with us. Prof, I know before we went to the break, you had mentioned the farm murders that were happening. And of course, when we look at the individuals that are being murdered, I mean, a lot of them are the farm workers itself, who are, of course, black South Africans. So my take on and this is where I disagree with Brent Boshoff III, is that I don't think he's looked at the stats carefully. That even though, yes, there are many white farmers that are being murdered, there are also many farm workers who are of black or colored identity that are also being murdered at the same time. And when you look at the way the murders are, and this is, of course, me just taking the stats that are coming from the South African Police Service, these are not murders intended to attack a certain race. It seems to be a murder that is sporadical. And of course, security is needed to be a concern with regards to that. So I just wanted to get your take on that, Prof.
So I agree with you 100%, that there's no doubt that there's a lot of murders, but you need to look at the composition of the South African population. More than 80% are black, about 9% are colored, and then if you look at the white community, it's about 7 to 8%. We are talking about just over 4 million, of which about 2.5, 2.6 million are Afrikaans-speaking white people. Now, the argument is that from a proportional perspective, the number of murders within that group is higher than the normal one. And that to them is a serious problem. The second problem is the brutality of that murders. No one is saying that it is only a white phenomenon. Without any doubt, it is a lot more comprehensive. Therefore, I believe if we want to get a cure for the South African problem at the moment, the starting point should be order, stability, and security. But now, if you follow the debate in South Africa at the moment with General Makwanasi's complaint, you will find that the police force, in many cases, are compromised to the extent that the argument is that the police is being overtaken by criminal syndicates, to the extent that we can say South Africa is a mafia state. So the problem, therefore, for the farmers is that they cannot go to the police and ask for security. They need to organize themselves. And I know my son-in-law and my daughter are farmers near Viljoenskroon, and I know how they are operating. They have a sort of a commando system. If there are farm attacks, they immediately mobilize and they drive to certain spots in order to prevent people from either stealing or murdering or whatever the case may be. And this is specifically prominent in the rural areas. The implications of this, however, is far-reaching for the South African economy. The United States of America is our number one export country, not the biggest one, but the number one export country, especially when it comes to motor vehicles, certain agricultural products, jewelry, and so on. And if the AGOA agreement is not going to continue, it's going to have a severe negative impact on the South African economy. And what is interesting, in their visit to the United States of America, Solidarity and AfriForum said that they are against American sanctions against South Africa. They are, however, in favor of sanctions against the ANC, which is seen as a criminally orientated organization. And you can only look at the Zondo Commission's report to find the perspective, as well as what Makwenazi said. You can also go back in history and look at other commissions. And what we are basically saying is that the criminal justice system in South Africa is falling apart. And now the only thing left, we must take action as a group to safeguard our own position. That is the basic argument. I cannot talk on behalf of Mr. New Ambassador. I can only talk on behalf of the Afrikaners and how they, the majority of them, is seeing the situation. Last point, Solidarity has about 700,000 members in South Africa.
Yeah. Look, Prof. Duvenhage, I'm going to agree with you that security is paramount, especially when it comes to the breadbasket of the country. And I know many Afrikaner farmers contribute with regards to that. And I've had discussions with AfriForum and, of course, I had a representative of Orania in that regards. Where I think it differs, and this comes to the next question that I'm going to ask. Before that, actually, just to mention that I agree that the United States is an important trade partner to South Africa, but the country itself cannot also be held hostage by an administration who does, in many ways, flip-flop a lot of its policies when it comes to trade. We've just seen now with China, it looks like they're about to hit a trade agreement with China. Nobody would have thought this would have happened a couple of weeks ago. But, Prof, I want to touch on race relations within South Africa, right? And I grew up in a multiracial environment, and I have a plethora of friends, from Afrikaners to blacks to coloreds, and this is the beauty of South Africa. What we saw earlier on this year with the farmers going, and many agree that this kind of had a bit of a sting in terms of improving race relations in a country where we really are becoming more divided from a social and economic perspective. How do we solve that? Because when I read the end of the statement here from the Afrikaner community, or some of these civil society members and professors and think tanks have said that we urge all our fellow South Africans and international observers to challenge these distorted narratives and to recognize the dignity of all people, not just those who fit in a political agenda. What they're trying to get at is that we need to find a way to bring a sense of unity or Ubuntu within this country. I know it's going to take a very long time, but how do we get to that, Professor?
To start with, I have no problem with the central principle of the Constitution, fighting for a non-racial, non-sexist society. But then we cannot allow more than 100 legislative frameworks based on transformational policies which has race as their basis. As I mentioned earlier, how are you going to bridge the racial divide? If I apply for a job, the first question is my gender identity and my racial identity and my language cultural identity. So it is clear that this government, like the old apartheid government, is institutionalizing racial policies. And then people are asking the question, why can't we bridge the divide? And the reason has a lot to do with racially defined policies. That is why the DA is now coming up with their policy of inclusivity in order to accommodate all groups. Either you go the socialist model of social and political engineering, and we know its outcome, or you go the way of appointing the best person in a position. Now, it's clear to me that we followed the first category and not the second one. And the outcome of this is dysfunctionality on all levels. 60 to 80% of our municipalities are dysfunctional. There are currently about 5 million illegal immigrants in South Africa. We can talk about provincial government. We can talk about Eskom, Transnet. All of them are basically falling apart and need to be rebuilt. And therefore, my argument, and I stated it also academically in articles, that we need fundamental reform. We need a new paradigm. And part of that paradigm should be to accommodate also minority groups. And that is not only the Afrikaner, that is all groupings. What is interesting, if you analyze the political environment, we are now building up towards a local election, end of 2026. The last figure I have heard is we have 470 plus political parties. What I am picking up is more and more identity politics. The Rainbow Nation is falling apart. We are not rebuilding it. And my big concern is not only the policy frameworks, but also the way it is being implemented in South Africa. And if you add to this the criminalization of the state, then we have a serious problem. And what is happening within the Afrikaans-speaking community is we cannot take this any longer. And you will find when there was that revolt in KZN in 2021, that Indian people, colored people, white people, and black people stood together there and worked together there. So these things are happening. But I am concerned about the racial legislation, and therefore I think this needs to be changed in a fundamental way.
Prof. Duvenage, good to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you, sir.
That's Professor Andre Duvenage, a political analyst from the Northwest University. After the break, I'm going to be speaking to Sarah Kuda in this week, a report on the murder of Shireen Abu Akleh. But it was revealed that this report was watered down by the Biden administration. Why? Given that she is a U.S. citizen covering a raid that was happening in the Jenin refugee camp. My conversation with Sarah is after this break.